Hey everyone, I just hopped off a call with an old friend of mine, old student, someone who's training to take on a bigger role within my own business, and she's having this swirling mix of things going on, and she's at the point where she's kind of overwhelmed. And so we were talking through that. We chatted for about an hour, and she brought up some really good points that I think would be useful for you guys as well, especially if you're dealing with overwhelm, with self-doubt, with confusion, a lack of clarity, a lack of focus. And these things are all related. And what I think they're really related to are the elements of a good story. And this idea comes from the work of Irving Polster. He was one of the early Gestalt therapists. He did a lot of work looking at personal narrative. And really, when we're looking at this idea of overwhelm, what we're looking at is like a story that doesn't make sense anymore for ourselves. How we conceptualize our own existence, how we think about the story that we're living into day to day. And there are three components that make up a good story. First and foremost is it's bearable, right? Like it's something you can endure. Even if you're suffering through it, you've got to be able to endure it. It must go somewhere, right? There must be a direction to that story. A story without a direction isn't a story we're going to read for very long. And it's got to be cohesive. What that means is the pieces have to fit together. There must be a sense of meaning built into it too. So you can look at the opposite of that and think, well, yeah, that's not exactly how I want to live my life, right? If it's unbearable, if it's not going anywhere, and it's incoherent, incohesive, meaningless, like that's a hell of a way to live life, and yet so many of us do, because we get caught in the weeds of it. We don't know how to navigate through it with any sense of ease or any sense of composure. So what I wanted to do is hopefully lay out some ideas and some practices for you in this little bit that can give you a greater sense of bearability, can give you a greater sense of direction, can give you a greater sense of cohesion, so you can start to live into a more fulfilling story for yourself, how you can embody the kind of narrative that you'd like to see play out in your life. I mean, really, it's the only thing we have to look back on at the very end. That's what this is all about. Like when you're lying in the last few moments of your life, what do you have to look back on? Well, it's the story you've lived. It's everything you've ever done. So like I hope it's worthwhile. I hope it's something you choose deliberately. So this woman I was talking with, this friend of mine, she's in the, forgive the language of it, but like the sticky fucking muck of it. Like can't tell up from down, left from right, like totally torn, making some very serious decisions in her life in the midst of this incredibly wild transition. And she's feeling really miserable through it. Like she cannot figure out what to choose. She's confused and disoriented. And we've talked about that orientation before. In particular, last week I think it was. We made a big long video about that. But I asked her, okay, so you're suffering through all of this. You're experiencing a lot of anguish, a lot of upset throughout it. Why are you not worse off? That's a good question you can ask yourself too, if you're in the point of overwhelm. If you're burning out, if you're strung out, stressed out, like melting down, why are you not worse off? I mean, I believe you that this feels like utter shit. I believe you that this feels really miserable, but it's also worth asking, why are things not worse off right now? And when I asked her this, she said, well, my friendships, my supports, I mean, I'm in one of the most beautiful places in the world. I've got a number of practices I can fall back on. All of this. And so for you, what you do for yourself when you ask a question like that is you reconnect to some sense of ground. Like you put yourself somewhere. You resource yourself more effectively. So you can build up this arsenal of some ground to stand on at that point. Which, go figure, if you want to take the next step, you've got to figure out where your 2 feet are right here, right now. So in order to make this more bearable for you, ask yourself, really, like, why are you not worse off? Flip the question. I mean, if you ask the question, which so many of us do, why am I so messed up? Why are things such a terrible shit show? You'll come up with endless reasons, because there are endless reasons why you're inept and inadequate and incompetent and all these other things you tell yourself you are. You'll come up with all of the reasons for that. But very rarely do we look for the reasons why things aren't worse off. And when we flip that and look at it from another perspective, Well, we get another view of things. You get another view of yourself. So really, take 15 minutes after you watch this. Write out for yourself. Like, set a timer and write anything that comes to mind. Why you're not worse off. You're going to surprise yourself. So that's how you can make your story more bearable. How you can suffer through it with a little greater sense of dignity and of composure. Now, the second thing, the direction. The story must be going somewhere, right? Do you know where it's going? I mean, a big part of this woman's challenge was that she had only a vague idea. She had like a kind of sense of what she wanted. So you don't have to have like every little detail mapped out, but for wherever it is you want to go, do you have some specific sense of it, even if it's the next immediate step? Like some specific idea, even of what you want to have for lunch tomorrow. Maybe not even tomorrow, maybe that's too much for you to process. What do you want right here and right now? Ask yourself, if it's a cup of coffee, fine, I want a cup of coffee. Okay, go get a cup of coffee. Start there. Like, you can piece together the direction of things one step at a time. Quite often it's the only way you know how to do it. So if you can't see some grand vision with any level of clarity, zoom it in. Like, maybe you're a little myopic. Maybe you can't actually see that far yet. Doesn't mean you're never going to be able to. So however far it is you can see that clearly, right? Like, map out in all the details of what you want for lunch today. We'll use that as the stupid example, right? A little hyperbolic in terms of how myopic it might really be. But if you're in the muck of it, like, maybe that's as far as you can see clearly. So see that with as great a level of clarity as you can muster up within yourself. Map out all the little specific details and then go do that. I mean, right here, right now, simple thing I want is to change position. My knee is talking with me. So, okay, I'll change position. Go figure. That little shift makes things a little bit better for me. It moves me more in a direction of the sort of self I'd like to be with it. So you do that one step at a time. What do you want right here and right now? And you take one small step toward that. Now, the sense of direction is something we often get in retrospect. We look back and think, oh, I've been on this direction for years now. Okay, maybe I can carry forward a bit more, right? So start first, make it bearable. Why are you not worse off? Second, check in with your sense of direction. What do you want right here, right now? And what's the smallest possible step you can take toward that? Now, this challenge of cohesion, it's a little tricky. Quite often, we only see the meaning of things when we get them in relationship to things. Like, quite often the things that feel meaningless, so we can't make sense out of, it's like we put too much on our plate at the buffet and we haven't digested it yet. So the cohesion, that comes about the more you can sit with the uncertainty and with the confusion. If you can be present with the confusion throughout all of the experience of it, you will start to make sense of it. I mean, it's the thing that we often forget. There's no chaos out there. I mean, it's a pattern of things that we haven't yet recognized, right? I mean, it's something that we haven't yet figured out how to make meaning out of. So all of the shit suffering that you've gone through over the years, like, what has it turned you into as a person? Like, if nothing else, it didn't kill you. And by God, maybe you even learned something from it too. I mean, we can't help but try to make meaning out of the world around us. It's a funny little phenomenon of self-reflective consciousness, is that we can't help but make meaning out of the world. We can't help but make stories out of things. That's part of how our cognitive process operates. So whatever the situation is you're up against, if it's a big challenge, if it's chew on it. Like, really, I'm going to use the analogy of food here, because food and information, like, there's a relationship there. I talk about it in one of the upcoming podcast episodes, but what we're looking at is something that's too big to chew if we can't make sense of it quite yet. So do your damn best, like, chew at it. That could be like writing about it every day for 10 minutes. Like, just write and write and write. Could be talking about it with a friend. Could be talking about it with a trained professional. Go figure, that might come in handy too. Like, whatever you can do to chew on that thing until you're able to digest it. Like, maybe you have bitten off more than you can chew. Maybe this is too much for you at this point. So fine, chew on it, break it down into whatever manageable chunks you can. So if anything, hopefully these are simple steps you can put into practice, right? If you are overwhelmed, if you are stressed out, if you are struggling to make it through, again, check in. Why are you not worse off? Then ask yourself, what do I want right here, right now? And what's the smallest possible step I can take toward that? And then number 3, whatever this big incoherent jumble of things is, write about it. Talk about it. Articulate your experience of it. And it's only through that articulation that we make sense of things. It's the only way that we can make some worthwhile meaning out of all the stuff that we've been through, is to attach a meaning to it, to create a meaning from it. And the way we do that is by chewing it up, breaking it down, digesting it, like making it a part of us and who we are and the narratives that we live out day to day. So, it's not easy by any means, but with those first 2 steps, then you're a little better equipped to find some sense of cohesion in all of this stuff, to make better sense of it, to orient yourself more effectively to the world around you. And that's not to say that you're done at that point, because it never ends. I mean, maybe it does. Maybe you spiral into more and more of your own little myopic, self-centered sense of the world. Like, in that case, maybe it ends. It ends painfully, messily. But it never ends. Like, if you have chosen to go after growth, if you've chosen to go after new experiences, if you've chosen to set bigger goals for yourself, you're going to continue to go through this process. It's like you continue to pull the rug out from under yourself, and you have to catch your balance. You have to get your bearings again. So you're going to go through this over and over and over again. It's just that each time you go through it, it might get a little bit easier. You might respond a little more readily to it. You might make a little more sense of it. And you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going until you die. That's what it all comes down to. Until you look back and think, that's what it was all about. Yeah, that's the kind of story I'm glad to have lived through. It's sure as hell better than looking back and thinking, wow, what a mess of a miserable story that was. Like, make something of it. No one else is going to do that for you. No one else can. And really, would you want someone else to make that for you? Personally, I don't want the pre-chewed food. I want to chew my own food. I want to live my own experiences. I want to make my own sense out of these things. I hope you do too.